Hello and welcome to this video on a simple but effective model of the human brain known as the triune brain. This model is built on the idea of three discrete and separate parts of the brain with three different roles. What is arguably a reptile brain, a mammalian brain, and a rational brain. Each of these is built on the others, and each has their own discrete and different purposes. While rather long in tooth now, the ideas put forward by Paul MacLean are straightforward and effective when viewed from an evolutionary perspective. He defines the brain as having three parts: a reptilian or primal brain made up of the basal ganglia, the paleomammalian or emotional brain made up of the limbic system, and the neomammalian or rational brain made up from the neocortex. If you look at this from pure evolution, you can see that it makes sense. As an organism becomes more complex, its needs move from basic things like moving towards food, light, or other positive influences, and away from danger. A more advanced organism has advanced and complicated processes involved in our behavioral and emotional responses, especially when it comes to behaviors we need for survival, feeding, reproduction, and social interactions. Finally, you have something like the cerebrum, which allowed our species to create tools and problem solve at a much more advanced level than what you would find amongst the less developed species, let's say. The idea of a primal brain assumes that many of our basic functions are going to be innate and practically automatic, and this is true to a certain extent. Regulation of breathing, heart rate, and other things are all done in response to stimuli within the body or outside of it. The primal brain is also supposed to be responsible for some of our more basic biological drives. These are occasionally referred to as the 4 F's: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproduction. Although, at least in the case of humans, these involve further steps that go beyond the basics of the basal ganglia. But the basal ganglia is where this is all supposed to begin. There are a series of structures found deep within the brain. They are what allow you to have control over things like your breathing. The basal ganglia play a significant role in anything that involves muscles and coordinated movement. It's what allows you to move your arms and hands. The benefit of an opposable thumb in our species is significantly improved by the fine degree of dexterity we have when trying to use it. Not only do the basal ganglia give us greater control over actions, but it also provides inhibitive benefits. That is, it makes it harder to conduct movements that aren't voluntary or desired, and so it means that you don't have spasms, and why certain degenerative diseases like Huntington's can cause problems. These diseases affect the basal ganglia, and thereby increase the ease of activation of motor neurons. This wouldn't be the case if the inhibitory function was there. Then you need to look at the next level, the mammalian brain or emotional brain. This is also called the limbic system. And as you can imagine from what we've described so far, given it's an emotional brain and mammalian brain, it has a big role to play in our behavioral and emotional responses. For the most part, we're talking about those 4 F's of biology here, and they are also still found deep within the brain, higher up than the basal ganglia, but lower than the cerebrum is. Because it's not within the cortex, but it is above the brainstem, you have different products being generated here. 2 of the notable structures are the thalamus and hypothalamus. These play big roles in the production and release of hormones. These hormones are released right across the body and can achieve various things. Whether this is sex drive, it can be associated with memories, whether pleasant or negative, our ability to socialize, and more. Then there are structures like the hippocampus and amygdala. These systems also play a role in our ability to understand, socialize, and empathize with others. Finally, there is the neocortex, and this is what was described as the neomammalian rational brain. That is the brain that allows us to achieve a lot more than other species can, comparatively. It's made up of multiple layers, and the important layers as far as the human species go are those on the very outside. These are what allow you to be who you are, your personality, your reasoning, your memory, and more. A lot of things that simpler creatures simply don't have. Think about what it takes to be able to coordinate some of the more advanced movements, what it takes to be able to think your way through a logic puzzle, be able to reason. All of these things are largely facilitated through this neocortex. Overall, the triune model of the brain is a great, simple explanation. That is the important part. It is simple. There are a great many complexities that it cannot capture or explain. As a concept proposed more than 60 years ago, it is long-lasting and rather old compared to other ideas that have been put forward, and the problem with it is that it has not moved forward with the body of research. It's built on the idea that organisms will have developed more and more complex structures over time, rather than either increasing the number of existing structures or refitting them for a new purpose. Adaptation over creation is generally how nature and evolution work. You don't create a new solution to a problem, rather you use the existing solution in a new way. This is the biggest criticism of the triune model. The ability to claim that the different structures are not only completely discrete, but that they've evolved separately, isn't supported by much evidence now. Evidence that wasn't available on the scale it is now when the idea was originally proposed. As said though, it is an extremely effective simplification of the complexity of the brain, and if you're trying to understand some of the more difficult ideas, it's a good way to be introduced to them, to see that there are different parts of the brain that are, if not entirely separate, at least separate enough that you can begin to look at what they do and why they do it. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions that you have below.